Chapter 11, Customer Relationship Management and Supply Chain Management. In some respects, kind of dissimilar topics, but they're grouped together into this chapter, so we'll cover both parts of them. Learning objectives for this chapter is to understand the basics of CRM and to understand the basics of a supply chain, including the strategies. How do you solve the issues around supply chains? And really, an effective use of a supply chain gives you a competitive advantage. So first, let's look at CRM systems, customer relationship management. So the first question is, let's look at the history of CRM. We have to go back to the past. Primarily, business was done in neighborhood stores, and you had this personal relationship. A few years ago, my wife and I were down in Ashland, Oregon for the Shakespeare Festival of the summer, and we went into the drugstore in downtown, and the front of the drugstore did not look all that much different than what this picture is. Next time I'm down there, I should probably take a picture of the actual store to put in here. But anyhow, we're in there browsing the aisles looking for, I think we were looking for some aspirin or something. And I noticed that as everyone walked in the door, the person behind the counter was, "Oh, hi, George. Hi, Mary. Hey, how's it going with that cat of yours? Did the leg heal up fine? And oh, are we going to see you next week at the the meeting?" And so everybody that walked into the store, except us, was known by the people behind the counter. They had a very personal relationship. Now we fast forward to today, and what do we have? We have a population that's mobile. So people don't stay put very long. They don't get to know their local vendors and stores. Plus, you have purchasing online on the web. Even though I have several Home Depot stores, around me that I oftentimes drive by on my way to and from other things, I will oftentimes order something online from Home Depot to be delivered to me at home just because of the convenience, and I'm thinking about it at 10 o'clock at night, and so a lot of transactions now do not occur in a store at all. Or you have on the right side there, the picture, you have these giant mega malls. And in case you don't recognize that, that's taken of the Mall of America outside of Minneapolis, huge mall. Up in Canada, they have one that's even bigger, the Edmonton Mall. And so what we have now is we've gone from a personal relationship between the merchants selling products and the customers to this impersonal, there's no relationship there at all. You're just an account number on a credit card. So why is that an issue? Why do we need to implement customer relationship management to address that? Well, there's a few statistics, and I always I find these interesting. I'd love to meet the author that came up with this and say, how did you come up with these numbers? But in any case, it has been reported that it costs 6 times more to sell to a new customer than to sell to an existing one. So if I come out with a new product and I want to sell that into the marketplace, I will have to invest 6 times as much marketing and sales and promotional efforts to get a brand new customer to buy that product than if I just focused on my existing customers. A lot more efficient. But here's an important one. If I have a dissatisfied customer, typically they will tell at least 8 to 10 people. And of course now with the advent of social media, posting that to 8 to 10 people can turn into 8 to 10 million people if it goes viral. So a dissatisfied customer can wreak havoc on my business. But here's an interesting one. If I just increase my customer retention rate by 5%, so the customers that stay loyal and don't go to the competition, if I just improve that retention rate by 5%, I could add 85% to the bottom line, the profits, because I don't have to go out and spend all that money to get those new customers. That's a huge difference. But here's one that should, again, point out why we need to focus on this. The odds of selling to new customers is only estimated at 15%. So the money I spend on that, I've only got a 15% chance of getting a return on that. But with an existing customer, I've got a much higher rate, 50%. And then this last one is 70% of the unhappy customers. So we go back up there to that dissatisfied customer that was going to tell 8 to 10 people. 70% of those customers will remain loyal to my company if we just address the issue. We address what the problem is. You look at all of those and it just says it is really important to understand our customers and to take advantage of that existing relationship. Now there's a group of companies that seem not to understand this at all, which is always amazing. And one of the groups of companies that comes to mind is the internet providers. They entice you to change. They will jack your prices up, but they'll give an introductory lower cost option to try and bring in new customers. Well, if they just gave me a reward saying, thank you for being a loyal customer for the past 2 years, in recognition of that commitment that you showed to our company, we're pleased to offer you the next 2 years at a 10% discount. Why not give an existing customer a reward for staying rather than trying to give a new customer a 50% discount to try and entice them to leave their existing? Maybe they'll catch on someday. When you look at customer relationship and the process, these high-value repeat customers and even low-value repeat customers, those are a group of very important customers you want to keep. You want all of these loyal repeat customers because it takes a lot less to maintain them. And of course, you have your customers out here that get lost. That's called churn. When you lose a customer, you'll hear that talked about in the industry of churning. One of the key things of customer relationship management to be aware of is this concept of customer touch points. That just means what are the various places and ways that our customers come in contact with our company. And so there's a lot, the obvious thing, it used to be through direct mail. Now we send out email. It can be certainly at the physical store. If you've got a physical store, the salesperson, call center, a variety of different ways that our customers interact with us and come in contact with us. But there's two critical ones that have been often overlooked by companies to their detriment. The first one is the World Wide Web, social media. Businesses have to pay close attention to what's going on in social media about their company. What's being said that's good, but most importantly, what's being said that's bad. And they need to respond and address it accordingly. As we saw last week with some of the social media disasters, a lot of companies don't understand that. But then another overlooked one is the field service technician. And this is one that actually got Comcast in even more hot water than they already were with their terrible phone support, is their field techs would arrive late, they'd come dressed sloppily, they had some real issues, and they had to really buckle down on that. And they put in this big ad campaign saying, "We heard you, we've changed. We will now guarantee the window that the technician will arrive within, and before, the day before they come out, we will email you their name and a picture so you know it's them at the door," and all these things, because they had done such a terrible job on that. So some of the term you'll hear, customer-facing applications, these are just the software packages that interact with customers. So certainly customer service and support, logging all those calls that come in for customer service and logging what the issue was, what the resolution was, is there a follow-up required, all that information. Salesforce automation, and actually one of the premier software packages for that function is actually called Salesforce. And that's used to track leads. So that as a salesperson, I go in and call on a purchasing agent, meet with them, and the purchasing agent says, "Wow, you've got some really nice products, some very good prices I'm very interested in. Unfortunately, I just placed an order with your competition, and I'm not going to need any more items for 6 months." Salesforce allows you to put into that account a reminder that, let's say at about 5 months from now. So, somewhere 2 to 4 weeks before the purchasing agent said they need to place another order, I better follow up on that with them and remind them so that I can get that next order. Marketing is another key, and we'll see in a little bit on that. When you use the information you have about customers to do a better job of marketing, a more efficient job of marketing. You don't want to market a product or a service to someone who doesn't need it. It wouldn't make any sense to market, let's say, an acne product to a senior citizen. There's some things that are appropriate based on the age or demographics of an individual that wouldn't make sense to someone in another situation. So being more efficient in our marketing campaigns, utilizing the information we have about customers. And that really leads into the campaign management as well. Those two items are pretty closely related. Call centers, everybody's favorite thing. They can be really bad. You want a call center, one, you want someone to get connected very quickly. You don't want someone having to hold for an hour and a half to be able to talk to someone. So very short queuing times. Someone that is very well versed in the language of the primary area that people are calling in from. If you're providing a call center for customers that are based in France, then you should have a French native speaking person on your call center. And certainly you need to be aware of regional accents. You want someone that has kind of a universal accent that anyone in that language group could easily understand. Outbound telesales, all I can say there is don't do it. I, at one point in time, tried doing some cold calling through the phones. I hated it, and I think all of us hate it when we get a call from someone where we did not initiate it. It's not a very effective tool. It's much better to find a way to communicate to people without interrupting them with a telephone call. Plus, today there are ways of preventing those calls from getting through too. There's some tools. We have one installed on our phone system at home that has cut our robocalls down to virtually zero. We get very few marketing calls anymore. So as I mentioned, with Salesforce automation, it really provides a host of tools for your sales team. Keeping track of the names and contacts in an organization, logging in those leads. But it also gives the salesman the ability to forecast and to say, well, based on that conversation I had with the customer, I believe, we've got a 90% probability I'll get their next order, and so that will be $50,000 this year and probably $125,000 next year. And so they put into their reports forecasting what their outlook of sales for all their customers. And it's also with the salesperson, a lot of times salespeople are great sales people. They can talk, they know how to listen, they're very adept at that, but they may not be up on every single product that they offer to have all the technical information right at their fingertips. So having a repository where they can have, what are the key selling points for product X? How does it compare to the competition? And tools like that, so they can go into a meeting with their customer. They can prep for the meeting by easily pulling up this product knowledge system to find out the key things. So they go, oh yeah, now I remember the training on that. And then they go in well versed for that particular meeting. And configurators are tools that allows the sales team. Some products are very complex. They can have option A, B, C, or D, but if you choose option B, you can't also choose option D. But if you choose option C, you can choose option P and Q. And you can have these very complex systems. One of the tools I automated as a marketing manager, I came up with a very complex Excel spreadsheet that had dozens of drop-down boxes where you would make your selections, and it had built-in error checking, so it would gray out and hide options that were incompatible with each other. I had, with that particular tool, there were over 2 million valid configurations that we could come up with, and I was excluding probably 20 million invalid combinations with that. So you can have a configurator tool like that stored and residing in your Salesforce automation tool. With customers, when we're talking about marketing, there's this idea, there's three things: cross-selling, upselling, and bundling. I think we're all familiar with bundling. That's most commonly, you see that when you bundle your cable TV with your internet, with your phone service, and you get a reduced price if you do all of them together. Cross-selling is the idea that, okay, based on the fact that you have this product, you might also be interested in this other product over here that's related. So it ties into it, as opposed to bundling. You're usually putting together things that really aren't necessarily related to each other. For example, cross-selling. I have a cell phone. Do I need a Bluetooth earpiece to go along with that cell phone? How about a case? A protective drop case for the cell phone. That'd be those are examples of cross-selling. Upselling is the idea that, well, yes, you can get the item that's on sale, and it's a good item, but for an extra $50, you can get into the next generation that has all these additional features. And you might want to consider that for, it's not that much more but boy, it offers some additional things. But if you want to get the item that you came in for on sale, no problem. We can go with that. That's upselling, where you're convincing someone that even though they came in to get a specific level of product or service, that it might be to their advantage and they would get more value if they moved up a little bit in that. Some of the customer touching software applications we looked at before, the customer touching situations, like the field service technician, the store, the person providing tech support on the phone. But there's also software that is interacting with our customers. Some companies are now allowing you to personalize the web pages when you go to their website, so that when you go to their website, what do you want to be the first page that you go to? You can customize it so that the landing page is not necessarily the home page, but it's someplace else. Certainly FAQs. Well-written, well-done FAQs are marvelous. What frustrates me, I go to some sites and their FAQs, they have like 5 FAQs and they are of the most general nature, and you go, big deal, that didn't help me much. But a really rich, with a lot of different FAQs and an easy navigation to them, can be a really positive thing to enhance your customer relationship. But it's the last one that I really like the most. This idea of loyalty programs. As I mentioned earlier with retaining customers, if you have some sort of a loyalty program in place, that really goes a long way to building that relationship with the customer, keeping the customer, and helps your profitability. So really encourage you to think about what can we do to reward our loyal customers. Offer them discounts on additional products or services, sending them a thank you card at the holidays. I was a beta tester for IBM software in the early days when they were developing their antivirus software for personal computers. And as a way of saying thank you, one day I got in the mail, they sent me a bottle of wine. I don't think companies are doing that anymore quite to that extent, but a lot of companies, you can send out a gift card saying, here's an Amazon gift card. We're just saying thank you for being a good customer. Little things like that go a very long way. But one of the really powerful things about CRM systems is that we now have a lot of data that we can mine and analyze to better understand our customers. So things like, as I mentioned earlier, targeting a specific group of our customers with a specific ad that has been customized for them. In the old days, you would send out flyers in the mail. Well, you had no way of knowing. You would just give the post office, here are flyers, give them to every house in this zip code. And so it had to be a generic one-size-fits-all massive thing. But now we have the ability to tailor it and say, okay, let's not put in stuff that they're not interested in. Let's make it appropriate to them. Let's be, just like if we had that personal relationship with them, that old mom and pop grocery store, they would know what you might be interested. You come in the store and say, hi, George. Hey, I just got in a new product and I was thinking back about that conversation we had last month, and I think you might be really interested in that. That's the idea of tailoring your marketing to specifically match the customer. We've talked about the cross-selling and upselling. So certainly if we have the data, that's how we can do the cross-selling and upselling, because we know what they have. Probably the best example of cross-selling right now is Amazon. If you notice, when you go to Amazon, they're always making suggestions to you based on your previous purchases. You might be interested in this. Sometimes I am, Most of the time I'm not, but they're trying to take advantage of that. They know what I have purchased through them, and so they're analyzing that and saying, based on my buying habits, I might be interested in this. Another key thing, though, that we can use the customer data for is it really goes into our discussions internally when we're looking about what should we do for new products and services. Should we discontinue products and services? We can certainly analyze, go to our customer call center and take a look at what have been the phone calls on this particular product and service. What have been the issues that they've been having? This is occurring a lot, so do we need to consider putting some engineering time into resolving it? You know, are we getting so much negative about this particular product or service we really should think about, let's just not even offer it anymore. It's not worth it. So valuable input into making key decisions on what products and services we offer now and in the future. And as already mentioned with the sales forecasting, we can now look at that sales forecasting along with customer buying habits, and we can come up with a financial forecast. This was something that as a product manager, I was constantly updating my financial forecast. I did it on a rolling 12-month average, saying based on my historical major customers that I dealt with, and what I was hearing from the customers, what their forecasts were, and based on what the industry forecast, I was constantly updating the dollar financial forecasting as well as specific product forecasting so that the manufacturing plant knew what to be doing. Another part of that with analyzing the data is looking at specific customers. In the particular case where I was working, we customized all the products for each of our customers. There were very few generic products that were sold to more than one customer. We almost always took the generic as a starting point and then did some modification, customization to it to make it unique for a particular customer. And so part of the analysis I had to do with my management team every year was an analysis of all my key major customers. How profitable were we? How much money we were making? And if there was a customer where we weren't making the types of margins that everyone wanted to see, then there was discussion about, do we want to continue doing business with that customer? Or if we do, what do we need to do to improve the margins? And so again, very useful information for making strategic decisions in the organization. Okay, that's CRM. I can't stress how important it is to have a good relationship with customers. But let's switch now to supply chains. So here's a generic supply chain. We start with a tier 1 supplier. And so let's say we're an automobile manufacturer. Tier 1 suppliers, they produce basic things such as glass, plastic, and rubber. And that those items get sent on to tier 2 suppliers, and they use those materials then to make the windshields, the tires, and the plastic moldings, and then they send those on to a tier 1 supplier that creates subassemblies such as dashboards and seat assemblies. In turn, they take those subassemblies and then provide them to the manufacturer, to my company, which I then take as the manufacturer and I put them together with all the other subassemblies and maybe some raw materials of my own that I modify and do things with, and I create a finished item. Typically then, that item goes to either a distributor or a wholesaler who then sells it, passes it on to a retailer who then goes to a customer. Now, this is a very simple version of a supply chain, and in fact there may not be just 3 tiers of suppliers on the left side of the chart. It may, some items may go through 5, 6, 10 different vendors until they're going into the finished assembly at my manufacturing plant. And there may be other individuals involved in the distribution. For example, on a international business, I may provide products to a distributor who then takes and ships them overseas to another distributor that then sends it to a regional distributor, and so there can be a lot more steps involved with it. And so the idea of supply chain management is that we have to manage every single step in the process as we start from the left side here until it gets all the way over to the right to the customer. Something goes wrong at any step along the way in the process here, and it breaks the chain. My company is only as strong as the weakest part of this supply chain. Now, a term you'll hear in supply chains, they'll talk about upstream. This is going from right to left. Customer places an order on the retailer places an order on the distributor, who places an order on the manufacturer, and then my purchasing department places an order on my tier 1 suppliers, who place orders on tier, and so forth. And also involves the flow of money. Downstream, let's talk about internal first. Internal is what happens, obviously, with me as the manufacturer, all the things that go on internal to my organization. I have process flow of information, purchase orders, internal, external, all the forecasting, all the activity going on internal to my organization, which has to be managed just as much as the external. And then downstream, that's what I really started the discussion on the supply chain with. That was the downstream of the materials going from left to right, going from the most basic raw components to the highest level finished good to the end user. So with supply chain management, there's the 5 basic components. Certainly we have to plan. That comes from forecasting, from our sales department, marketing department, senior management. I have to have a source. In order to support the plan, where am I going to get the items? What vendors am I going to work with? What do I have to do to get those vendors qualified? Does engineering have to approve? So sorry about the interruption there. So does engineering have to approve my vendors before I can add them into the supply chain? And then obviously we have to make the product. So we have to have all the steps in place to actually get it fulfilled. Then we have to somehow deliver the product to our warehouse, distributor, if we're doing direct sales, whatever's involved in there. But then also we have to have in place a plan for how do we handle returns. Sometimes things go bad. How do we handle warranty returns? Sometimes people get our product and it's not what they wanted after all, and so they want to return it for credit. What's our return policy? How are we going to deal with that? What are we going to do with the items that get returned? Are we going to scrap them? I hope not. A lot of companies do. They say it's not worth their time and effort to fix them. But we need to have a process in place for dealing with the returns. iOS. No, this is not Apple's operating system. When you see it in the context of business, iOS is an interorganizational information system. And it's really just to improve how we communicate with all our partners in that supply chain so that we can reduce the cost of routine transactions, have better information so that we eliminate errors, shorten the amount of time required to complete those transactions, get rid of paper because of its inefficiency and cost and handling, and just make life easier for everyone involved. Now, of all those things, the one that really jumps out that is key is this idea of compressing the cycle time involved. Thank you, Amazon, but people now expect instant satisfaction, instant gratification. They want it and they want it now. The best forecasting cannot possibly anticipate every possible outcome with 100% accuracy. We're going to get close, but we're not going to be right. The key is when we find out, when we get closer to the point and realize, we underestimated the demand there, how quickly can we react and respond? And so reducing cycle time in any aspect of the supply chain is essential. We have to be very nimble and able to react quickly. So there's a couple of ways of approaching supply chain management. How do we keep everything working the way we want it? And there's the push and the pull model. The push model is kind of historical. That's the way we did things. We made product and then we put it to stock. If the stores didn't want any right now, we put it in a warehouse, we kept it in inventory, and we just planned and said, okay, we're going to make 100,000 of these this year, and we'll store them until somebody wants them. The concept of there is, if you remember the Kevin Costner movie about the baseball field, and he makes a statement, build it and they will come. I think it's called Field of Dreams. And that's the idea here. We're going to make it and people will buy it. But the problem with that is you have to be extremely accurate in your forecasting. If you get it wrong, you end up with a bunch of inventory that you can't sell, or you end up with not enough inventory. And in our instant gratification society today, if I'm out of stock of an item, what do my customers do? They go to my competition. And they say, well, I really wanted their product, but their competitor's product is pretty good too, and I can get that today, and I don't want to wait 6 months for them to get back in stock. And so I lose the sale forever. So a real problem, you have to have just spot on forecasting. The pull model is just the opposite. It says, I'm not going to make anything unless somebody wants it. And as soon as somebody says they want it, then I'll make it. So I never carry any excess inventory. I only make what is required. Way to think of that would be like in a restaurant. A normal restaurant doesn't make a meal ahead of time hoping that somebody's going to come in and buy it. They wait until you get there and place your order, and then they say, okay, that's what I'm going to cook. The problem with the pull model is it has to be a very short manufacturing lead time. If I go into that restaurant and say, yeah, I'd like to order the steak. And they were to say, well, we'll need to go out and buy a cow, and have it slaughtered and have it cut up and aged, and why don't you come back in 2 months? They're going to say, forget that, I'm going to go to the restaurant next door. We go into that restaurant. If I can get my meal in 15 to 30 minutes, okay, that's fine. I'll wait that long. But you have to be able to respond in a very rapid fashion when you're using that pull model where you haven't made stuff in advance. So some of the issues we have in supply chain, uncertainties. As I mentioned before, the best forecast with the best information we have is not going to be right, and then things change. And in our global economy, things change all the time, and it changes very quickly. Another issue is that we're dealing with multiple vendors, multiple activities, both internal, external, business partners that may be located in another country, another time zone, and all these things have to work together in a coordinated fashion. That is complex, and anytime you have something complex like that, it can create some issues. As already mentioned, the demand forecast, there's so many things that affect the forecast. Competition comes out with a new model that's got more features than ours. Competition drops the price. There are weather issues, and so my competitor can't supply product because their main manufacturing location is snowed in. Economic conditions. There's all these things that affect our best attempt at providing a forecast. And then there's something we're going to talk a little bit about here, and then I'm going to show you a video in class too, the bullwhip effect. And the idea of a bullwhip effect, if you notice here on the bullwhip, a little bit of motion close to the hand translates into a very wide swing at the end of the bullwhip. And that happens is we know there's normal variations and fluctuations with customer sales. It just sales in January are not the same as they are in March or in June and August. They vary up and down over time. That little bit of variation, when our retailer places orders, it can translate into a bigger variation over time, and the order they place to the manufacturer gets even more, and then the orders from the manufacturers to the suppliers, the variation. So the concept here is a small change can have a huge ripple effect all the way through if you're not having really good communications between all the parties involved here, so that you can say, no, don't react to that little variation. We're fine. We're going to keep the orders where they're going. It's no big deal. As a product manager, my office, it was covered with charts of all my major customers. They all had their own different seasonality and ordering patterns throughout the year based on their fiscal year and other normal corporate issues that they had. And so I had those all posted up so that as I could see when orders were coming in, I would look at it and say, oh, the orders for Ace are down for August. We're not delivering things. And then I look at it and I can see that's normal because Ace is located in Italy, and Italy shuts down most of their manufacturing for the month of August for vacations. There are some areas in Europe where, in essence, most of the country takes, summer vacation at the same time, and they just close businesses down. So you see a dip, and then you see things really pick back up again in September, kind of thing. So I could look at that and see, I see the variation, but I'm not going to react to it because I was expecting it and I know it's there. Like I said, we'll look at a little cute beer example in the classroom. So how do we solve these issues? JIT, and we'll look at some videos on this as well in class, just-in-time inventory. The concept here is that the raw materials and sub-assemblies that I need to make the finished good at my facility, I don't want to have those components in my factory until I need them. So I look over on my shelves and they're completely empty. The order comes in to tell my manufacturing to make something, and I look over on the shelves again, and magically exactly what I need to make for this order, this quantity, is there. No less, no more, just exactly what I need. I affectionately have renamed when I refer to just-in-time, and instead of calling it knit, or instead of calling it JIT, I actually call it knit, which to me that stands for never in time, because that's been my experience that more often than not, I never get it right. I never have quite enough inventory when I need it. Information sharing, to me, is the way to go. The more that we communicate and talk, the better decisions that we jointly make with members in the supply chain. As I mentioned, I knew my customers, knew their ordering patterns, their seasonality, what products they were ordering, what their competition was doing, how they were stacking up. And so when I got an order from our largest customer that was significantly larger than I thought it should be, the first thing I did was pick up the telephone and call the purchasing agent and say, so what's going on? This order is much bigger than I thought you were going to be placing. And the purchasing agent said, thank you for calling. Ignore the order. They had just implemented a new ERP system, and all their orders were coming out crazy. And so I told him, I said, well, based on historically what you've used and what's going on, I think a reasonable quantity would be this amount. And he said, fine, perfect. Let's go with what, because at that point I had a better handle on his business than he did, because they were in just disaster, crisis mode, trying to get their ERP system working correctly. Vendor managed inventory. The concept there is that instead of keeping the sub-assemblies and raw material physically in my business, I'm going to make my vendor hang on to that. So that when I want it, I just say, I need 10 of these, 2 of those, and 3 of those. So it's a concept of kind of like JIT, but really all I've done is I've said to my vendor is that I don't want to carry the inventory. I want you to carry it for me. And so it really just shifted the cost of not knowing how much I was going to need to where my vendor is carrying the excess inventory instead of me carrying it. I had a few customers where we did vendor managed inventory with. It's time consuming and complex, and I don't know that either company, my customer or us, benefited from that. I think we probably would have been better to have just stayed the old way of doing things. And then lastly, we're talking about better communications being essential. And we'll take a look at this a little more in class. The idea of EDI, electronic data interchange, you'll hear that term tossed around. It's really, just think of it, it's a protocol. It's an agreed upon format where one business can communicate to another business a purchase order. And really, that's pretty much sums up what it is. It's can be expensive to set up because of the hardware required, and you do have to make sure that you're using, the proper EDI format. And there are some things that EDI does not do well with. For example, comments. If you want to order something, you want to order 20 of these, but you need this slight change made to it. It doesn't know how to handle that. It really only works where you want something exactly the way it is, exactly out of the catalog, and then it can work well. So that's Chapter 11. We'll see you in class.